Hello, my name is Carrie Brown and I am with the Central Mississippi Regional Library System. Today I'm going to be reading to you chapters 5 and 6 of Calendar Mysteries April Adventure. Written by Ron Roy, illustrated by John Stephen Gurney, and published by Random House, New York. Chapter 5, Raccoon Clues. It took only a few minutes to walk to Indian Way Road, where Mr. Pocket lived. Bradley brought Pal. Pal liked to play with Randolph, Mr. Pocket's dog. The kids climbed up Mr. Pocket's porch. Bradley rang the bell. They heard barking from inside. A man's voice said, "Hush, Randolph!" Then Pal barked too. His big tail swung back and forth. The door opened and Mr. Pocket smiled at the kids. "Well, hello," he said. He was holding a fluffy dog in his arms. "Look, Randolph, we have company." Randolph wriggled to get down to play with Pal. Pal tugged on his leash to reach Randolph. "Hi, Mr. Pocket," Bradley said. "We were wondering if we could ask you some questions." Mr. Pocket raised his bushy white eyebrows. "Questions? About what?" he said. "About missing Easter eggs," Nate said. "Ooh, a mystery," Mr. Pocket said. "Come right in." The four kids and Pal trooped into Mr. Pocket's living room. Mr. Pocket set Randolph on the floor. "You can let Pal off his leash," he told Bradley. Bradley did, and the two dogs began to wrestle. "Please, come in the kitchen," Mr. Pocket said. "I have something on the stove." Bradley, Brian, Nate, and Lucy followed Mr. Pocket. He walked over to the stove and stirred something in a pot. "Do you kids like spinach?" he asked. "No!" shouted Nate and Brian. "Yes!" shouted Bradley and Lucy. Mr. Pocket laughed. "Don't worry, I won't make you eat any," he said. "Actually, I'm boiling dandelion greens. They taste even better than spinach." "You eat dandelions?" Nate asked. "My parents pull them up and throw them away. Aren't dandelions just weeds?" "Yes, they are weeds," Mr. Pocket said, "but if you pick the leaves before the yellow blossoms open, they make a delicious meal. I just boil them for a few minutes, then add a little butter, salt, and pepper. Yum!" Mr. Pocket set down his mixing spoons. "Now, what about this egg mystery?" he asked. The kids told him how Dink, Josh, and Ruth Rose hid some plastic eggs for them to find. "But they also hid 4 real eggs," Bradley went on. "They painted them gold. They said that if we found them, we would get a treasure." Mr. Pocket smiled. "Did you find the eggs?" he asked. "No, they told us where they hid the eggs, but they disappeared," Nate said. "We remembered seeing you in the park," Lucy added. "We wondered if you saw them." "No, I only saw the swans and a lot of dandelions," Mr. Pocket said. Randolph and Pal raced into the kitchen. "I wonder if Randolph ate the eggs," Brian said. Mr. Pocket laughed. "My little dog doesn't like eggs," he said. "Well, we'd better keep looking," Bradley said. "Thanks a lot, Mr. Pocket. Sorry we disturbed you." "You didn't disturb me at all," Mr. Pocket said. "Randolph and I love visitors." He walked the kids to the door. "I hope you solve your mystery," he said. The 4 kids walked out onto Mr. Pocket's porch. "You know, I just thought of something," Mr. Pocket said. He was looking through his screen door. "Raccoons often steal birds' eggs to eat. I saw a family of raccoons this morning. I wonder if they took your eggs." "We saw them too," Brian said. "That's a good idea, Mr. Pocket." The kids said goodbye, and Bradley put Pal back on his leash. "Let's cut through the park and check one more time," he said. "Maybe we'll see those raccoons again," Lucy said. "They'd better not be having eggs for breakfast," Nate said. Chapter 6, Snakes eat eggs too. "What will we do if the raccoons have the eggs?" Brian asked. They were waiting for a light to change so they could cross Main Street. Bradley grinned. "Ask them to give them back," he said. "What if the eggs are already in their stomachs?" Nate asked. "Then we'll let them keep them," Bradley said. The kids crossed the street and headed for Center Park. "I saw the raccoons walk into those trees," Lucy said. She pointed to the trees near the high school playing fields. "Maybe they have a home there," Bradley said. Pal tugged on his leash and led the kids to the trees. He sniffed the ground and whimpered. "Pal, if I let you off your leash, will you lead us to the raccoons?" Bradley asked the dog. Pal said, "Woof." Bradley unsnapped the leash, and Pal took off barking. He raced to a tall tree and put his front paws on the trunk. The kids ran over to the trees. They looked up into the branches. "What does a raccoon nest look like?" Nate asked. "I think they sleep inside the trunk," Bradley said. Pal let out another loud bark. He tried to climb the tree. "Oh my gosh, look!" Lucy said. About 6 feet above their heads, a raccoon face peered out of the hole in the trunk. The raccoon made a little coughing noise at Pal. "Now what?" Nate asked, looking up. "We found the nest, but we still don't know if they have the eggs." "And I'm not climbing up there to look in the nest," Brian added. "Mama Raccoon doesn't look happy to see us." "I don't think the raccoons took them," Lucy said. "Why not?" Bradley asked. "Guys, remember when we saw the raccoons in the park?" Lucy asked. "They walked right past us." "Yeah, the mom was leading the 3 babies," Brian said. "Well, none of them had an egg in its mouth," Lucy said. "And they weren't carrying an egg in their paws either." "You're right," Bradley said. "They were probably just going home to sleep. Raccoons hunt for food at night." "Maybe they ate the eggs before we saw them," Nate suggested. "They could have," Bradley said. "But they leave the eggshells on the ground. Let's go look." The kids ran toward the pond. "Let's split up," Bradley said. "Look everywhere on the ground." "What if the raccoons ate the eggshells too?" Brian asked. Bradley shook his head. "Yuck! I don't think painted eggshells would taste very good." The kids walked around the pond. Right away, Pal started barking at the swans. They were on the water flapping their wings. "Chill out, Mr. and Mrs. Swan," Nate said. "No one is going to hurt you. We're just looking for eggshells." "Maybe they have a nest somewhere," Lucy said. "They think we're going to bother it." The kids walked quietly and carefully through the tall grass. Bradley led the way, with Pal in front on his leash. Out on the pond, the 2 swans kept watch. "Careful," Bradley whispered over his shoulder. "There may be snakes." "Who's afraid of snakes?" Brian said. "I am," Nate answered. Suddenly Pal barked and tugged on his leash. Bradley saw the hair on Pal's neck stand up. "What is it, Pal?" Bradley asked. He looked at the ground in front of Pal. Then he saw what had made Pal bark. A black snake was curled up in a patch of sunlight. The snake raised its head and poked its tongue into the air. Nate came up behind Bradley. "What's going on?" he asked. Bradley pointed at the snake. "Don't move," he whispered. Nate took one look and gasped. "I couldn't move if I tried," he stammered. Thank you. Be sure to tune in next week for chapters 7, 8, and 9. Goodbye.